Now, there's been a steep increase in air safety incidents and accidents in the country in the last few months. Over 160 accidents have been reported in the 2021-2022 financial year in the general aviation sector. Now, to discuss this further, we're joined by aviation analyst Latham. Des, thank you very much for your time this morning. Now, can you firstly give us context on the 161 reported incidents? Is it a concerning figure in the broader aviation sector, or it's a concerning figure in the South African context where we've had minimal reported incidents before?
Well, I think you've got to take a number of things into account here. The first is fatalities. Those have not gone up radically. And the second thing is that the figures we're given are year on year. And of course, we had something called COVID in 2020, and there were 22 incidents entirely in that year. So obviously, if you look at stats, and stats can lie, you can say that the last year they went up significantly on the previous year, which they did because there were fewer people flying. General aviation, which is where most of these incidents are taking place, was down more than 50% in 2020. So there were only 22 incidents that whole year. So if you add the 2020 with 2021, you get to close to the 160. It's not even 160, it's more like 145 incidents and accidents. And then you've got to look at fatalities. But with that said, I mean, you look back at 2002 and 3, I mean, there were close to 200 incidents and accidents in 2002 and 3. So if you want to do comparisons, you've got to say, okay, we're looking better. But that, again, is a false number because you've got to look at the number of planes flying and how many air hours are being flown by general aviation, and that's gone down. So there is actually an increase in the number of incidents. But I needed to put that in perspective and say, look, hold on a second. If we're going to talk numbers, we need to have a good, hard look at these numbers and understand that they are, the incidents are rising. And the reason for that is lack of flying experience over the last 3 years, mainly. There are other reasons.
Can you take us through the others? Because that was probably my next question as to what can we attribute this increase to?
I mean, it is flying experience, and you've got to put that right at the front of the table. Because flying an airplane, I'm a pilot, it's not like riding a bicycle or driving a car. It's much, much more technically demanding of human beings, and you have to practice at least an hour or two a month to really stay in the game. And so what happens over the period of 2020-21 in particular is that people reduced the number of hours flown because they were just not allowed to fly as much as general aviation. They couldn't get to the plane as often. And thirdly, the economy has gone down, so people didn't have the spare money to fly. So all those things kind of compounded together in a situation where more pilots were flying less, if you like. And the planes that were flying, secondly, the maintenance issues around planes. Planes hate to be on the ground. It's one of the things that we don't fully understand about machines. Machines are designed to be machines. They're designed to do what they do. So cars are designed to drive and planes are designed to fly. And if they stay on the ground, maintenance becomes a problem over time because you have seals that begin to dry out. All kinds of things take place in the engine. So it seems counterintuitive, but it's not like an expensive watch that you buy and put away. An airplane's not like that. If you put it away and don't fly it, it breaks basically inside the hangar. So we had a situation now in the last 3 years with the pandemic, with people not flying their airplanes as much. So there's been a secondary issue there.
And then insofar as the aviation authority is concerned, I know the director wrote a letter stating that the incidents themselves were not unique, but the increasing number is not a matter that as a regulator they can overlook. Is that a fair warning to operators, holders of licenses?
No, I think it is because, I mean, as much as, the authority and the pilots always have this kind of verbal sparring situation. You've heard it over the years with the SAA implosion and so on. There's always been allegations back and forth about the SAA doing this, and then pilots, that the authorities oversees what pilots do. And so there's always this tension, which I think is a kind of a positive thing myself, as long as it doesn't go too far. But the bottom line is this: there have been more commercial aviation incidents involving one or two of our airlines over the last 3 months than there have been previously in that same kind of period. So we see that there is some kind of issue going on with maintenance and quality. Secondly, the kind of incidents I'm looking at in 2021 and this year up to now involve what looks like training and repetitive training issues mainly. In other words, people are not up to speed with some of the safety regulations in terms of hours, as I've said. But there is a third thing I need to mention quickly, and that is that our training in South Africa is weighted towards the European system. We use what's called the Joint Aviation Regulations, JAR system. We used to use the American system, which is JAA. What that means is that the authority is now fixated on theory, on exams. So what's happened is you have people who are accountants, who are not pilots, who think they can be pilots, to be quite blunt, if I may say so, who are spending 80% of the time passing their exams, which are really, really hard to pass. There's a 15% pass rate, and 75% is what you need to get. And 20% of flying, whereas it should be the other way around. And so I'm flying with pilots half my age who've never experienced an incipient spin, who are my instructor. In other words, incipient spin is a very technical thing, but it involves an airplane spinning towards the ground at high speeds. You have to learn how to survive that. And many of the younger pilots I'm flying with have never done one, and they're training me. So I think that we need to have a very careful look, the Civil Aviation Authority, on our entire training process and the fixation on theory, which I think has gone too far, my personal opinion.
So perhaps it should be a 50-50, where you're doing 50% of theory and 50% you're actually practically driving planes.
Yeah, because that's the game. You know, it's, as I've said to you, it's an artisanal thing. Flying is artisanal. It's like cutting a diamond. The older you get, the better you get. There's an old saying in flying: there are old pilots and there are bold pilots, but there are no old, bold pilots. If you take chances as a youngster in this game, or you try and cut corners in your hours or whatever it is, eventually it catches up with you. So we really need more people to be flying more regularly in training. The theory is very important, obviously. I'm not saying do away with it, but I think there's been now such a shift. And so when things go wrong, that's when pilots earn their money, don't forget. When things go wrong, they need to put it right.
Then perhaps we need to speak to SACA to find out why there's greater emphasis now on theory as opposed to, like you say, flying the planes, which is something that they would be doing on a daily. It would be interesting to hear their reasoning around that. And then just lastly, Ethiopia's Aircraft Investigation Bureau, they had the report of theirs, which SACA seems to want to take on review, in fact, where they're recommending that SACA establishes an air investigation unit that is completely independent of it. What do you make of that?
I think that's very important. You know, we hired the Ethiopians to look at Zulu Sierra Charlie Alpha Alpha, which is the Cirrus jet that was doing calibration systems and crashed in George. And three of our top pilots lost their lives in that. And it was a terrible moment. But when you look at what happened there were a number of things in that report that the CIA was not happy about. And they tried to delay the release of the report at first. And the Ethiopians were very independent when they did this report, and they're Africa's biggest aviators at the moment. And so we hired these people to tell us what they thought. And then when they did say that what they thought, we then tried to stop them from saying that. So I think clearly the Civil Aviation Authority has to take a good hard look at that report, which showed that the maintenance of their own airplane was not up to scratch. And that was the first thing. Secondly, the thing I've just said to you about recovery from unusual attitude, it's called, which is the incipient spin thing I mentioned. The senior pilot had not had proper training on that for 2 years. And that by itself is a secondary thing we've just mentioned about, you know, you fly an airplane, they put you into the situation at night, for example, where they put the plane into a spin, and you are kind of blinded, if you like, and then you are told you have 10 seconds to recover. When they lift the thing off your eyes, the airplane's at an unusual attitude, it's nighttime, you're spinning towards the ground, you have to get that airplane out of that situation in 5 to 10 seconds. If you don't get it out of that, you fail. That senior pilot had not done that kind of training for 2 years, which I'm afraid to say is an indictment. And that's one of the reasons why the CIA removed this report, or was trying to get it rewritten, if you like, because that's not very good to hear.
No, it's very dangerous, actually. It's very dangerous, even for us, those that are getting onto these planes. If we know that the training is not at that level, or somebody hasn't done that for 2 years, it's scary. But just in closing, your thoughts on the SAA and Takatso deal? Should we finalize at the middle of this year? Your thoughts?
Well, I've been looking at this with some degree of suspicion for some time, as many of us have, because there's basically the fewer than 5 airplanes left the SAA is flying, and they used to fly, 90. The number of pilots was 388, and there's now fewer than 80. This is not a good business model. They're trying to capture an environment here that has gone past them. Airlink and FlySafair, for example, are flying around Southern Africa and have been doing so for years. And SAA has to try and play catch-up here. So I don't see how this is going to happen. Whatever agreement is signed, it's just a brand that they're buying right now. It's not a business. Takatso, they're buying a brand. They're not buying a business. This airline has not made money since 2011. What kind of miracle is going to provide the investors with that kind of income, apart from government interference and then reducing the number of flights that other airlines can take? some kind of political decision to revoke the license of United or America, whatever it is, Emirates and so on, to get SAA a bit of a shot at the new business model. So I don't see whatever miracle we're talking about there with Takatso. I'm afraid to say I'm very negative about that, which is unfortunate because SAA is such an old, established brand in our country, and it's known around the world.
Operative word, as you say, being brand. It's not a business according to you anymore, but rather if anybody purchases, it's a brand. Des, thank you very much for your time. That's aviation analyst Des Latham. More news and updates.